chosen ones. The thing about monsters is they never expect the prey to bite back. For years, they lurked in the shadows of your life, watching, plotting, convinced they had you under their thumb. Cults, by their very nature, thrive on two things: control and fear. What they didn't anticipate was the simple, devastating truth: you were never meant to bow. Did you know that over 70% of people who leave cults cite one pivotal moment that shatters the illusion? A single act, a single person can unravel an entire empire of manipulation. That's where you come in. The wild card, the curveball, the chosen one they never saw coming. You didn't just walk out of their clutches. You marched out, unapologetic and undefeated, leaving their self-proclaimed prophets scrambling like they just lost their Wi-Fi signal. Now, they're terrified because nothing is more dangerous to a cult than someone who sees through the smoke and mirrors and lives to tell the tale. This isn't just a story about survival. This is a reckoning, and they're terrified, as they should be. Number 1. The cult feared you because they couldn't control you. Nothing is more threatening to a system built on domination than someone it cannot bend to its will. Cults thrive on one thing above all else: submission. They rely on their ability to manipulate thoughts, dictate behavior, and convince people that the only path to survival is through obedience. But you refused to play by their rules. You saw their game for what it was and made it clear you wouldn't be a pawn in it. That alone made you dangerous. Control is the foundation of their power. Every word, every ritual, every demand is designed to create predictability, because if they can predict you, they can own you. But you shattered their illusion of control. You didn't follow their script, and your defiance sent shockwaves through their carefully constructed facade. It wasn't just about what you did or didn't do. It was about what you represented to them. You were a walking rebellion, proof that their authority wasn't as absolute as they claimed. What scared them most was the unpredictability of your choices. They couldn't anticipate your next move, and that terrified them. For a group built on control, the unknown is their worst enemy. Your refusal to comply wasn't just an act of rebellion. It was a reminder that their power is fragile, their system fallible. They couldn't predict you, and that made them weak. In their world, control equals survival. Your existence disrupted that balance, throwing their entire structure into chaos. They feared you not because of who you were, but because of what you showed them about themselves, that their power was never real. You weren't just uncontrollable, you were unstoppable, and that shook them to their core. Number 2. You became a mirror to their hypocrisy. The cult wasn't just terrified of you, they were terrified of their reflection in you. You became a mirror, forcing them to confront the hypocrisy they had buried beneath layers of rituals, rules, and self-righteous dogma. They sold lies dressed up as truths, promising salvation, community, purpose. But everything they built was designed to benefit the few at the top while crushing everyone beneath. Your existence exposed that you didn't just reject their system, you held up a light to its rotting core. What scared them wasn't just that you saw through their lies, but that you survived without them. Cults thrive on convincing people that life outside their control is impossible. They tell their followers that the world is dangerous, that they are the only source of safety and guidance. By walking away and living your truth, you proved that was a lie. Every day you exist outside their reach, thriving in your own freedom, is a reminder to them and everyone else that they are not needed. You didn't just leave, you unmasked them. The kindness they preached turned out to be manipulation. The community they offered was a cage. The leaders who claimed divine authority were just humans, drunk on power. And because of you, they couldn't hide behind their facade anymore. Their fear of you isn't about your strength or defiance alone. It's about what you represent. Presently, you showed them and anyone watching that their entire foundation is built on contradictions and lies. You didn't need them, and worse, you showed others they didn't either. That's why they feared you. You became the truth they couldn't deny, the proof that their carefully constructed reality was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Number 3. You rewrote the script of power. You didn't just challenge their power, you rewrote what power even meant. Cults are built on rigid hierarchies. At the top sits the leader, surrounded by layers of enforcers and loyalists, all feeding off the submission of those below. To them, power is something external, something they hoard and wield to keep everyone else in line. But you shattered that concept completely. You showed them that true power doesn't come from control, coercion, or fear. It comes from within, and it's something they can never take away. Your defiance wasn't just rebellion, it was evolution. They expected resistance to look a certain way, angry, violent, desperate. But you didn't give them what they wanted. Instead, you moved differently, with a calm, unshakable confidence that they couldn't understand. You weren't playing by their rules anymore, and that terrified them. They relied on fear to keep people obedient, but you weren't afraid, and without fear, their power over you dissolved. More than that, your existence exposed their power for what it truly was, hollow. They built their entire system on the belief that they were untouchable, that their authority was absolute. But when faced with someone they couldn't control, someone who didn't need them to survive or thrive, they had no idea what to do. They couldn't manipulate you, couldn't intimidate you, couldn't break you. In that moment, they realized their so-called power was just an illusion. You didn't just reject their authority, you redefined it. Power, as you proved, isn't about dominating others. It's about self-mastery, resilience, and the ability to stand firm in your truth. That's a kind of power they can't replicate, and it's why they feared you. You became living proof that their empire was never as strong as they claimed. Number 4. You proved that fear isn't absolute. Fear was their greatest weapon. It's what kept their followers obedient, what silenced dissent, and what created the illusion of their invincibility. They depended on it to control every aspect of life, what people thought, how they acted, even how they saw themselves. But you refused to be ruled by it. That single act, stepping outside their carefully drawn boundaries, shattered the illusion they'd worked so hard to maintain. Fear thrives when it goes unchallenged. It's like a shadow growing larger in the absence of light. They counted on you to stay in the dark, to cower under their threats and warnings, but you didn't. You walked straight into the unknown, daring to defy the rules they claimed were unbreakable. And when nothing happened, when the sky didn't fall and you weren't consumed by the consequences they promised, they realized the power of their fear tactics was an illusion. Your courage wasn't just rebellion, it was a crack in their foundation. Suddenly the others began to wonder, if you can survive outside the rules, maybe we can too. Fear is contagious, but so is bravery. What you did wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a beacon. You showed them that the cage wasn't locked, that the terror they felt was manufactured, and that life beyond the cult wasn't just possible, it was better. That's why they were terrified of you. You didn't just overcome their weapon of fear, you dismantled it. In doing so, you threatened to unravel everything they'd built. They weren't invincible, and you proved it in the simplest, most devastating way, by refusing to be afraid. Fear may have been their weapon, but courage turned out to be yours, and it was stronger. Number 5. They feared what you would awaken in others. The cult wasn't just afraid of losing you, they were terrified of what you represented to them. You weren't just a defector, you were a symbol, a living reminder that their control wasn't absolute. They didn't fear your escape because it weakened their hold on you. They feared it because of the ripple effect it could have on everyone else. Cults depend on conformity. They rely on everyone believing the same lies, following the same rules, and fearing the same consequences. The moment one person steps outside that system, the entire structure starts to wobble. By breaking free, you weren't just defying them. You were showing others that escape was possible, and that is a terrifying thought for any cult. They've built their power on the idea that they are the only way, the only truth, the only option. If you could survive outside their grasp, maybe others could too. If you could thrive, maybe others would follow. That's why your rebellion wasn't just personal, it was existential. The power of your defiance wasn't just in what you did, but in the questions you forced others to ask themselves. If they can leave, why can't I? If they were strong enough to see the truth, what am I still afraid of? Those questions are dangerous because they plant seeds of doubt, and doubt spreads faster than fear. You didn't just walk away. You lit a fire. Your freedom became a beacon for others trapped in the same cycle of manipulation and control. That's what they feared most, that your courage would spark a revolution, turning their carefully controlled hierarchy into a crumbling house of cards. They weren't just afraid of losing you, they were afraid of losing everyone else who might follow your lead. Number 6. Their whole ideology was built to oppose you. The cult's entire ideology was built like a fortress, imposing, rigid, and seemingly unshakable. It thrived on the idea that they owned the truth, that their way was the only way, and that everything outside their doctrine was chaos and ruin. But then there was you. You didn't just challenge their beliefs. You embodied a contradiction they couldn't ignore. You were living proof that their truth wasn't absolute, that their rules weren't universal, and that their control wasn't inevitable. You didn't fit into their narrative. You weren't just someone who rejected their teachings. You were a walking paradox, a living question mark that defied everything they stood for. They preached that no one could survive without their guidance, but you did. They claimed to hold the keys to enlightenment, but you unlocked your own doors. Your existence wasn't just defiance, it was a crack in the foundation of their entire belief system. The chosen one isn't someone who follows a script. They are the one who rewrites it. That's what made you so dangerous to them. Their dogma demanded conformity, but you proved that individuality could thrive. Their leaders insisted on submission, but you showed that freedom was possible. They claimed to own the truth, but your life made it clear that truth can't be possessed, only discovered. That's why you weren't just an enemy to them, you were their undoing. A single crack in a foundation may seem small, but it grows over time, weakening the entire structure. You didn't just reject their ideology, you exposed its fragility. You were the proof they couldn't erase, the exception that shattered their rule, and the paradox that made their so-called truth crumble under its own weight. Number 7. Your survival exposed their fragility. Cults thrive on the illusion of strength. They project themselves as invincible, unshakable forces that hold all the answers and possess unquestionable authority. Their leaders wear a mask of divinity. Their rules claim to be absolute, and their systems are built to convince everyone inside and out that they are unassailable. But your survival cracked that facade wide open. Your existence outside their grip wasn't just defiance, it was a challenge to everything they claimed to be. They had built their authority on the belief that anyone who left them would crumble, lost without their guidance. But you didn't crumble, you thrived. And that was a brutal reminder of something they tried desperately to hide. Their power was never real. Your survival exposed their fragility. They weren't divine or infallible. They were flawed humans clinging to control through manipulation and fear. They claimed perfection, But your life was evidence of their failure. They couldn't keep you under their thumb, couldn't predict your moves, and couldn't break your spirit. And that terrified them because it revealed the truth. They were never as powerful as they wanted everyone to believe. Your continued existence became a taunt to their arrogance. Every success you achieved, every moment of joy, every step forward in your life was a reminder of their imperfection. They couldn't destroy you, couldn't erase you, and couldn't deny the reality of your freedom. You weren't just someone who escaped their control. You became proof of their limits. Their so-called divine authority was nothing more than human frailty wrapped in elaborate doctrine. And as long as you lived, you were a testament to their weakness, a walking contradiction to their claim of invincibility. They feared you because you exposed them for what they really were, fragile, flawed, and powerless without your compliance. Number 8. You are their living consequence. They thought they could break you, silence you, erase you. To them, you were just another name on their list, another life they could control, manipulate, and discard. They assumed you'd fade quietly into the background, crushed under the weight of their oppression. But instead, you did the unthinkable. You survived, not just barely but fully and defiantly, and in doing so, you became the living embodiment of their reckoning. Your very existence is a consequence they never planned for. Every time they see you thrive, it's a reminder of everything they failed to do. They couldn't crush your spirit, couldn't keep you in line, couldn't force you to conform. Their entire system, built to suppress and dominate, couldn't contain you, and that eats away at them. They don't just fear you, they fear what you represent. You are living proof that their promises were empty, that their control wasn't total, and that their authority was a lie. They claimed to be infallible, to have all the answers. But your survival is a glaring contradiction to every word they preached. You expose their failure at every turn, not just to themselves, but to everyone who watches you live your life on your own terms. It's not just the fact that you escaped, it's the way you've thrived since. They see your joy, your freedom, your strength, and it burns them because they know they had no part in it. In fact, your success is a direct response to everything they tried to destroy. You are a scar on their narrative, a constant reminder that they didn't win. Every step forward you take is another blow to their ego, another crack in their delusions. They don't just fear you, they fear the undeniable proof that they were wrong. Number 9. You turn their rituals into meaningless gestures. Cults rely heavily on rituals. They are the sacred ceremonies that bind followers to the ideology, the symbols that reinforce loyalty, the actions that serve to control minds and behavior. These rituals are designed to make people feel connected, an important part of something bigger, something that they believe holds the key to their salvation. But your existence shattered that illusion. By simply living outside their framework, you exposed the hollowness of their so-called sacred acts. The power of their rituals is rooted in the belief that they hold some mystical significance, that by performing them, followers unlock favor, protection, and truth. But when you stepped outside their grasp and thrived, you proved something they couldn't afford to acknowledge. Those rituals didn't mean a thing. You didn't need to bow, chant, or submit to their rules to find peace or purpose. You found your own way outside of their control. Your survival, your freedom, and your growth became the ultimate act of defiance. While they continued to perform the same meaningless rituals, hoping to maintain the illusion of power, you lived a truth they couldn't argue with. You didn't need their ceremonies to find your worth, to build a life of fulfillment, or to connect with something greater. That's when the rituals lost their power. The symbols they relied on no longer held weight. When faced with the evidence of your existence, the chants, the gestures, the sacred practices, They were just empty gestures, lifeless without the control they once wielded. You proved that salvation wasn't a product of their structure or their rules. It's something found within oneself. Outside their false framework, you didn't just leave their system, you rendered it irrelevant. And that terrified them because it exposed their rituals for what they truly were, nothing more than empty acts designed to keep people trapped. Number 10. Your defiance is a wound they can't heal. Cults are built on the belief that their system is flawless, untouchable, and eternal. They pride themselves on being the answer to all of life's uncertainties, the fortress that protects against chaos. When someone leaves, when someone rejects that belief, it's not just a simple act of defiance, it's an attack on their very identity. And you became that attack. Your rejection of their world didn't just disrupt their plans, it struck at the heart of everything they thought they controlled. You became a wound in their carefully constructed narrative, one that refuses to heal. Every time they try to move on, every time they try to reassert their power, your defiance reminds them of their own vulnerability. They can't erase you. They can't rewrite the past to erase the fact that you broke free and thrived. No matter how much they try to pretend that you never existed, that you never left, you've become part of their story, a permanent scar that they can't close or forget. They will never be able to look at their world the same way again. You are the crack in their armor, the mark of their failure, and no amount of propaganda, no amount of control can undo the truth you represent. Every time they see someone new questioning their authority, every time they face the possibility of more defections, they're reminded of you. You're a living testament to the fact that their system isn't invincible, that their power isn't as absolute as they pretend. Your defiance will always be a wound in their story, one that no amount of force, manipulation, or denial will ever heal. You exposed their weakness, and that is something they can never forget. Number 11. You are their nightmare, a liberated soul. A liberated soul is a concept that strikes fear into the heart of every cult because it exposes the greatest lie they've ever told, that freedom is only possible through their doctrine. To them, liberation is a threat. It means their control doesn't just have limits, it's entirely optional. When you broke free, you didn't just escape. You embodied the very thing they've spent so long convincing their followers doesn't exist, a life outside their grip, thriving without their rules. You are their nightmare, not because you're a threat in the traditional sense, but because you are proof that their hold on people is a lie. You proved that living a full, authentic life without submission to their doctrines isn't just possible, it's real. And that's terrifying because it undermines everything they've built. They rely on the idea that life without their control is chaotic, meaningless, and impossible. Your liberation shatters that. It makes their entire ideology seem unnecessary, fragile, and ultimately obsolete. But it's not just you they fear, it's what you represent. Your freedom is a seed of doubt in the minds of everyone still trapped within their walls. When they see you thriving, happy, independent, strong, they start to wonder, what am I still doing here? Your existence turns the cult's narrative on its head, offering proof that the truth they've sold is a hollow myth. You're not just living outside their framework, you're thriving in a way they never promised, and that becomes a question no leader can answer. You are the living embodiment of the life they've said was impossible, and in that, you represent something far more dangerous than any threat or rebellion. The idea that people don't need them to live freely and fully, and that's why they fear you most of all. Number 12. You became the story they couldn't erase. Cults are masters of control, but their greatest weapon isn't just their ability to dictate actions. It's their power to control the narrative. They rewrite history, reshape truth, and erase anything that threatens their carefully crafted version of reality. They believe that by controlling the story, they control everything: reality, perception, and the future. But in rejecting them, you became the one chapter in their history that they couldn't erase, no matter how much they tried to manipulate, suppress, or distort the truth. Your existence remains a constant. You are the part of their story they can't rewrite, the evidence of their failure that stands as a permanent testament to their fragility. They may try to bury it, silence it, or paint you as a misguided victim, but your story doesn't fade. It can't be silenced by their propaganda or erased by their narrative. In a cult, the leaders can control the words, the rituals, and the actions, but they can't control your truth. Your life is proof that their grip isn't as secure as they want others to believe. Your survival, your defiance, your strength, all of it exists as an unalterable chapter in their history. It's a reminder that their power isn't absolute, that their beliefs are flawed, and that their so-called authority isn't as invincible as they claim. Every time they attempt to rewrite their story, your story remains. It becomes an eternal warning. You are the proof they couldn't erase, the crack in their narrative that shows how easily their empire could crumble when faced with truth. You became the one thing they couldn't control, and that's something they can never forget. You are the unerasable chapter in their story, and as long as you exist, the truth of their fallibility lives on. In the end, the cult's greatest fear wasn't losing control over you. It was losing the illusion that they had control over anyone. Your existence is a living testament to the fact that their power is fragile, their truth is a lie, and their authority is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. You broke free, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually. In doing so, you became the greatest threat they could never neutralize. They will never be able to rewrite your story or erase your truth, because you are the proof that freedom, authenticity, and self-empowerment are not only possible, but undeniable. You didn't just escape their grip. You became the very thing they could never control, a symbol of defiance, a living contradiction to everything they preached. And that is why they will always fear you, not because you're a threat to their power, but because you expose the truth of their weakness, in your survival, your growth, and your unyielding spirit. You've shown that their empire was built on nothing more than fear, manipulation, and lies. And that, my friend, is a story they will never be able to erase. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed a journey that reveals the power of defiance, the strength of survival, and the undeniable truth that no force, no matter how controlling, can suppress the human spirit. But this isn't just about one story. It's about the countless others still waiting to break free, to find their truth, and to stand tall in a world that tries to silence them. So, if you felt the power in these words, if this resonates with you, make sure you're part of the revolution. Subscribe to the channel, join a community that thrives on awakening, empowerment, and truth. Don't just be a spectator, be part of the movement. This is your story too. Let's keep it alive.